Welcome to Module 7. So in this module, we're going to talk a lot about our database management systems, processes, and services, and things of that nature. It's going to be a little less detailed and a little less technical, I guess, than previous modules where we were writing, SQL statements and things like that. And so this first segment, we're going to be talking about what we're able to do with our database. And so we've been able to do a variety of different things with it at this point, right? We've been able to add in new records. We've been able to retrieve information, retrieve specific records that we want. We've been able to edit or modify those records. And then we've also been able to delete those records. And so all of these processes, these four in particular, are very common when dealing with resources and relational database systems in general. And so there's kind of specific names that we refer to these different processes as, and there's an acronym to kind of help you remember that, and that acronym is CRUD, and it stands for Create, Read, Update, and Delete. So to kind of better help visualize this, let me shrink this down a little bit. So we have our specific actions that I just mentioned, our CRUD acronym, Create, Read, Update, and Delete. And so these are the different actions that we take, and so they kind of map to specific terminology depending on the system that we're using. And so kind of what I mean by that is in our databases in SQL, right, our SQL keywords that are mapped to these four specific actions. We have insert, and let me kind of add some color here to make things pop a little bit more. There we go. So I'm going to have my system that we're working with over here, in this case SQL statements, and then the words that they're mapped to. So for create, we got insert. For read, we got our select statements. For update, we have update. And then for delete, we also have delete. Very similar. And so when we're retrieving information from a database on a website, we're not really dealing directly with the actual resources within the database. So we're using a protocol called HTTP or HTTPS for more modern versions, the S just being a secure version. But HTTP is our hypertext transfer protocol. And this is kind of how we pass information from websites and resources and data and things like that. And the way that we do that is with different methods. That's kind of what we refer to it as with HTTP. And so these methods are really just kind of action verbs to kind of do something with data, to retrieve information or change it or whatever the case may be. And so these HTTP methods map to these same four keywords that we've been dealing with right here, our CRUD acronym. So for our HTTP method, for create, we have post. For read, we have get. Update, we have patch. There we go. And then for delete, we also have delete. So post, get, two of the most very common ones when we're talking about HTTP, retrieving information and inserting new data and things like that. But these are, let me put this over here, our HTTP methods. And so again, when we open up a web browser and we go to a specific site and we retrieve information from a database, we're not really communicating directly with the database itself. We're just kind of identifying different actions that we can take to get the data or modify the data as needed. And so the resource that we're kind of working with there is typically, a file or a procedure which connects to the database and then pulls in for information that way, right? Like a standard HTML page, our hypertext markup language, which is what very basic websites are written in. All that is essentially a file sitting on a server somewhere out on the internet. Then we open up a web browser, we go to that web address, but all we're really doing is just requesting that resource, that web page. All it is just a file on a server, and we're requesting that information, and we do that with the HTTP methods. And then by doing that, we have our hypertext markup language, which kind of pulls all that information from that file and pulls it into our browser and then reassembles it, and then we get to see all that information on our web browser. And so that's kind of how HTTP and HTML works. And so those HTTP methods kind of map to these 4 keywords here as noted. So there's that. There's CRUD, a very, very common acronym that you'll hear in a variety of different systems, SQL, HTTP, things like that. So that's pretty great. Yep, all that stuff I just mentioned. Excellent. So next, let's talk about catalog services. So if you remember back to Module 4, we talked about catalogs and what they are. And basically, again, they're just information about our database. What we refer to as metadata, which is, data about data. And so what this catalog is, again, is information about our different fields and tables and things like that within our database. And so typically a database catalog is created and maintained automatically by the relational database system that we're using, whether it's Access or MySQL or whatever the case may be. And so what it really kind of looks like essentially is just a series of tables that are typically hidden from the basic user. But there may be some instances where the administrator may want to access those specific tables to retrieve some information that's needed within those tables. And so in enterprise level database management systems like Oracle and other ones like that, they sometimes refer to these catalogs as data dictionaries, right? So basically all they mean by that is a read-only set of tables that provides information about objects in the database, including default values if there are any, and database users if there are any. And so it can provide a lot of other useful information that may or may not be useful to the administrator. Definitions of all the objects in the database, including tables and views, obviously. The amount of current and allocated space for each object. Again, the default values, like I mentioned. Integrity constraint information, if you have constraints in place. Privileges, roles granted to each user if they are implemented. Again, we're talking about enterprise level database systems here, so you are able to do that in those types of systems. And then also other things like auditing information and just other general database information. Again, kind of that data about data, essentially. And so kind of tying it back to what we've been using, our Microsoft Access here. If we come up to database tools, and I just have one of the JC Consulting Access files open. But if we come up to our database tools and click on Database Documenter, this is going to be how we're going to access essentially our catalog for Access. And so you can see all the different tabs up here for all the information that we have. And if we just click on all objects, then we can see la-di-da-di, everybody, right? So lots of information in there. Another catalog service in here is in the relationships. If you look at the relationship design, Within Access, you can actually generate a relationship report, and this is essentially a catalog service as well. So you can see that there. Whoops. You can change the formatting, landscape, make it fit better, right? All sorts of good stuff like that. But that's accessing the catalog service. So great. That wraps up this segment. I hope it was useful to you guys, and we'll see you in the next one.